Last time I talked about the nitpicks that I have with LitRPGs and isekais when it comes to resource bars, you know, HP bars, stamina bars, mana bars, stuff like that, and how much I hate them. Today, I want to talk about things that I love about LitRPGs or isekais, and I'm going to be using Dungeon Lord as an example. Specifically because I want more people to look up Dungeon Lord. I left a link to my Amazon affiliate link in the description for you guys to check it out. It's on Audible, it's on Kindle, go look at it, it's amazing. At this point, Dungeon Lord is basically like the grimgar of LitRPGs. It's super underrated and more people need to look at it, honestly. But one of the things that isekai or LitRPGs do that make me happy is when they justify being a LitRPG or an isekai. What do I mean by that? Well, in a lot of isekai-like stories, you can probably argue they don't need to actually be isekais. You can still have the same exact story without the whole getting sent to another world thing. A good example of an isekai not really needing to be an isekai is Faraway Paladin. While I'm sure there's some subplot at some point in the story that might connect to it being an isekai, it overall doesn't really matter. But in stuff like Dungeon Lord, Ed's old life of being on Earth never goes away. Fair warning, if you have not read the book of Dungeon Lord or listened to the audiobook on Audible, you're gonna get spoiled for massive story plots. I highly recommend you guys to go check it out before you continue in this video because it's honestly pretty big. Dungeon Lord's main world, Obelisk, is connected directly to the human world, and humans from our world can interact with things in that world. So humans from our world can play and interact in Obelisk Online by making avatars. These avatars are golems in the world of Obelisk Online and are super powerful. Currently, throughout the story, we are learning how these golems work, how they were created, and what that means for the world. Ed, who was sent directly to Obelisk Online, has his actual body there, but his friends from Earth still have their avatars and will meet him online. They may not recognize him sometimes, and some of them try to kill him, and at some point, some of them may also be sent into that world as well and become possible rivals, or sometimes also possibly just baggage. The gods of Obelisk Online are kind of, how do I put this? They're getting really close to basically recruiting warlords and mercenaries and sending them into that world and turning them into dungeon lords just like Ed, which is a problem if you give anyone that is an actual warrior from our world actual power, because currently they're only sending in gamers just to kind of test the water, see if it's a good idea or not. Ed realizes the only thing stopping the dark gods of Obelisk Online from basically taking over the planet is the fact that there's a balancing system that stops them from being able to do something like, say, get somebody who knows about radiation and nuclear bombs and sending them into the world and turning them into dungeon lords. If someone did that, they would be able to make probably a nuclear magical bomb. However, they're being restricted by the magic system of Obelisk Online, which I need to make a video talking about the magic system at some point, which is gonna take a long time. And these constant reminders that our world is still connected to Obelisk Online culminates in the end of the 4th book, when Ed, at this point, who is basically superhuman compared to like a normal human from our world, gets sent back to our world and is trapped there for the 5th book. He's also considered a criminal, by the way, and is currently on the run while having magical powers in our world. So it's kind of spicy. And the reason Dungeon Lord is such an interesting and good story is because it is an isekai. A lot of other isekai stories just don't need to be isekais for them to work out the way they do. Dungeon Lord fundamentally can only be as good as it is because it's an isekai. And they use the good and bad of being an isekai as a way to make a good and interesting story. And it doesn't just feel like a throwaway thing that they're using for tags on the internet, essentially. They also do fun little things when it comes to Ed interacting with people in Obelisk. They don't have the same language. While there is a magic spell that kind of translates things from English to whatever language they use in Obelisk, there is mismatches with the language, and certain times certain things will be said and it just doesn't sound correct to people. And it's always entertaining to watch the characters kind of try to figure each other out sometimes. Because, for example, in Obelisk Online, when they say shit, they say dunghill instead of shit. And Ed uses the word shit. So the more people interact with Ed and the more Ed interacts with those people, their language starts to mix up together, because the closest people to Ed will start swearing like Ed does, and the closest Ed gets to them, he starts swearing the way that people from this world swears as well. So that's a slow, subtle change in the way that people talk to each other based on the fact that they're surrounded by people from like other worlds and stuff like that. It's just really interesting. I think one of the funnier details is the fact that Ed has these shoes that are his work shoes. They're basically like shitty work Converse that are given to him by his job. And he's still wearing these shoes by the middle point of the second book. And people in certain parts of the world know that Ed is from a different world because of how different his shoes are. Because some of these people have seen what Earth looks like. And it's really funny when they're able to tell that Ed is from Earth because of his shoes, or specifically because of his Converse. There's also just a whole bunch of random stuff that happens throughout the story that like make Ed stand out like a sore thumb as a person in this world. And it's not treated as like something that they can be like, haha, it's kind of funny kind of thing. It's treated as a problem because he has to hide these aspects of himself so he's not like targeted by people, so they ask him questions so they don't out the fact that he's a dungeon lord. Ed's ignorance of the world affects the story, and it seriously affects his ability to navigate this world and be able to hide appropriately from basically the church who's trying to kill him. Also, Ed's ignorance of the world kind of helps push his views on light and dark gods in a specific way. Just like you and me, when I say dark gods or light gods, our brains probably immediately go to, oh, the light is the good, the dark is the bad. And that is true in this story, but it also gets a little more gray when you realize the church is being very abusive towards the people in the world and don't really give people like Ed a chance to actually talk to them. Also, Ed's lack of understanding of how magic works also affects his relationships with people around him. Levi, who is a witch, dabbles in a lot of dark magic, and you would think she's okay with like sacrificing innocent people for power, which is one of the big ways that dungeon lords gain strength and power, and she's actually not. While yes, out of everyone in Ed's party, she's the one kind of leaning more towards chaotic evil, she's not okay with sacrificing people when it's not a necessity or when it's just convenient. Because she was raised in a dungeon and she sees how horrible doing stuff like that actually is, and it doesn't really benefit you as much as people think it does. This causes some friction between her and Ed because Ed assumes that she'd be okay with it, but she's really not. And there's stuff like this throughout the entirety of the story. Ed makes kind of assumptions based on his information from his world, realizes that he's kind of wrong, and he kind of looks a bit like an ass to a degree, and then he has to apologize and actually learn about the world properly. And this isn't something that happens over the course of 1 or 2 books. When you're going to a new culture and a new world, you're going to still be struggling to really understand everything about it for a long time. By the 4th book, Ed's been in that world for about 3-ish years, and he still struggles with parts of the language, and he still kind of realizes that he doesn't know as much as he wishes he did. And hopefully this video has convinced you to kind of go check out Dungeon Lord. It's fun. It's a nice little package of a story that I cannot wait to get to volume 5. It's gonna be amazing. I really want book 5. I've been waiting for years for this thing. But if you want to see more videos talking about fantasy stories like Dungeon Lord or Grimgar, subscribe. If you like videos like this, when I just talk about random nonsense about fantasy stories, hit the like button. Let me know in the comments what you like about fantasy stories or isekais in general, or what you dislike about fantasy stories or isekais in general in the comments. A special thank you to our subscribers over on our Twitch. If you guys want to help us out, subscribe to our Twitch or use the thanks feature here on YouTube to get a shout out at the end of the video. And thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.